According to sociologists, American society had changed dramatically over the last two generations. Society showed that we're much less involved in the community than we used to be. And here to discuss what's my mean for society is sociologist David Lee. Welcome to program. Thank you. First of all, can you summarize the issue for us? Well, as you say, Americans in the United States, they're less involved in community than they were in, say, 1960. There's less participation all around. We get together a lot less, even with friends. Can you give us some examples? Well, one statistic that comes up a lot is membership in the PTA, the National Parent Teachers Association. In the 1950s, almost half of parents with children under 18 were members of the PTA. They got together, attended meetings, and raised money for children's schools. Well, membership in the PTA went from 50% in the 50s to under 20% in 1995, and that's just one example. The number of people who attend other kinds of public meetings about local affairs such as, I don't know, improving bus service or crime in neighborhood has gone down by about 60%. It's like people are less interested in the community. Yes, that's what it looks like. They're less interested in the political process as well. Look at newspaper readership, for example. Only about 25% of people aged 20 under read the newspaper every day. That contrasts with 80% of older Americans. There's a big difference. It sure is. And what about the number of people that vote? That's down too, isn't it? Yeah, voting is a really very basic measure of political participation, and voting is way down. In the turn of the century, I mean the last century, so in 1900, about 85% of eligible adults turned out to vote. In the last presidential election, less than 50% turned out. Yes, see the problem, but you're talking about political involvement and involving local organizations. But what about our social lives? You mentioned we socialize less as well. Yeah, we socialize less than we used to. In the 1950s, people had friends over to dinner more often. They visited neighbors more often. Generally, people seem to have a much better social life back then than we do now. That's really interesting. So we're becoming more isolated from each other. Yeah, but is this such a big deal? I mean, you may say, so what? Are these kinds of social connection with other people maybe important? I mean, these days we have a telephone, we have the internet. Yes, the telephone has replaced face-to-face contact a lot, but informal social connections are actually very important. Why? There's a high correlation between social connections in the community and crime, for example. The more people know one another's names in the community, the less crime there is. I suppose it makes sense. Everybody knows who you are. Yep, and people live in a community with a lot of social connection tend to live longer. They have better health and are generally happier. Wow, so I guess there is a need to make people feel more connected to the communities. But how would you do that? There's a $1 million question. Well, one way could be encourage people to volunteer more. Volunteering is a great way to get involved in the world around you and build connection with other people. Maybe we should all to hold block party to get to know neighbors. Absolutely, why not?